A parallel back to this every now and then. The first one is this, and I'm taking it out of Psalms 55, is they have a persevering mindset instead of an instantaneous mindset. Now I got to throw a little sarcasm in here so that I can get through the rest of this talk. Did you guys hear about the two boys who were in the hospital, the 7-year-old and the 8-year-old? And the one boy was like, "Hey, what are you in here for?" And he said, "Oh, I'm getting my tonsils out." The other boy said, "Oh, that's awesome. You're going to love it. I had that done once. You'll wake up and they're going to give you all the ice cream and all the Jell-O you could ever want." And then the other boy says, "Well, what are you in here for?" And the 8-year-old boy says, "Circumcision." And the little boy goes, "Oh, man, I had that done when I was a baby and I couldn't walk for a year." The truth is, some wounds just take longer to heal than others. And people who have found God to be greater than their hurt rarely experience an instantaneous healing. Rather, the healing for the wound in their souls comes from a persevering miracle. Now, with all my heart, I do believe that God heals instantly and immediately all the time, whether it's physically or emotionally or anything else. I've seen it. I also know that there are some things that God doesn't heal immediately. And I will forever be amazed at how God gives grace and peace and comfort and strength which surpasses all understanding to people who are asking for it as they're walking through a time of hurt in their life, and He is forming them into someone that He wants them to be. I want to talk about this for a second because I think sometimes we forget that you and I are living a process of God refining us. We're living it. And the best way for God to refine you and I is for Him to dig up and bring to the surface the garbage from our past. And one of the things that I think happens to us as Americans, maybe other people too, is we're surprised by hurt. We're shocked by it. I didn't deserve that. That was bad form. And I just go, wait a minute. Jesus told us, He told you and I that we were going to have troubles. He told us that. And there are a lot of people who have been told by someone in the church that the reason why you haven't been healed and the reason why your hurt is still in your life is because your faith is not adequate. Or you have a sin that you have kept covered. And it has absolutely destroyed and killed them. And I know these people to be some of the godliest people I know. I have a hard time with that one, and the reason why is this. A theme I see in the Bible is God taking people and doing far greater things than you or I will ever do with them for the kingdom, and yet the entire time they had incredible hurt in their life. They had incredible pain, they had incredible grief, and God walked with them through that and accomplished incredible things. And every one of them would say, it was worth it. David said in Psalms 55, 16 and 18, he said, "But I call to God, and the Lord saves me. Evening, morning, and noon I cry out in distress, and He hears my voice." David's praying with a persevering mindset right there. Evening, morning, and noon I cry out. That's a persevering mindset. Evening, morning, and noon. Now, I wish you could wave a magic wand over hurt and it disappear. I wish you could say a simple magic prayer and it all go away. But as long as you and I live in a world where there is an enemy that is jealous of our favor with God, even to the point of death, and will do whatever it takes to seek ruin in our life, even if that means drawing up our past, you and I are going to experience healing for hurt be a process, sometimes a lifetime. Because there is an enemy that doesn't want you to know who God wants you to be. He doesn't want you to know it. And so most of us have probably experienced what it feels like to have our past held against us, used as leverage. I know for my own life, I think of Hannah every single day. And it's hard every single day. I know I was 4 years old. And I know I didn't comprehend what was happening, what I was saying, what was taking place. But it's still hard for me every single day. It's hard for my family every single day. Now that I have a daughter who is the same age as Hannah was when this happened, I'm experiencing a whole new bunch of emotions because I'm seeing Hannah in my daughter. And I'm seeing the honesty and the sincerity that a little girl has. And so that's hard. It's hard every time I see a ditch. It's hard every time I see an ambulance because I remember what happened. And what I find myself doing is every single day taking that hurt before God and going, God, can you use this for something greater than? Because I can't do it on my own. 1 John 4:4 says, you dear children are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. I have a past, and I also have a future. And so do you and I, because of Christ. And it appears to me that God does his best work over the course of decades and generations, not instantaneously. God does his best work when it involves lots of people, an entire family. And he drives this point home in Genesis, and he says, I'm the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. He drives this home. And there's an issue here, too, that I want to talk about. If you don't deal with it, your kids will have to deal with it. And the Bible is really clear that there are blessings that are passed from generation to generation, and there are curses. And so for my kids' sake and my family's sake, I want to deal with it. I want to deal with it. I love how David concluded this psalm, verse 22. He said, cast your care on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. He'll sustain you. Hurt is a guaranteed part of life, and God has absolutely promised to sustain you. Second habit that a person who has found God to be greater than is this. There's a need to gradually and continually disinfect the wound. Any of you guys ever had a septic tank growing up? Maybe you have one now. Septic tanks are great. You can be in the back of your beautiful yard, vines, just lush and beautiful, and you can be lying on your beautiful lawn, just kicking back, enjoying everything, absolutely clueless to the fact that a couple feet beneath you is a big tank of the nastiest stuff you will ever come across in your life. Why is that? And how come you enjoy the grass that you're laying on so much? Why do you think it's so green? But if you've had a septic tank for long enough, you know that septic tanks build up. And so periodically, you got to have the Roto-Rooter guy come, you got to have the honey wagon come and clean that sucker out. Now, you guys know that they call the honey wagon the pump truck that comes to your house, huh? And that guy, you know what? I'm never complaining about my job ever again. That guy, he's a real American hero, okay? Anyways. That guy whips up, he pulls up, he jumps out of his truck, and he grabs a honey dipper hose, and he goes right over like nothing, pulls the cover, and goes right to work like it's just something he does every day. And you and I, every time, watch and go, I'm going to give that guy a tip. Because I know what I flushed down the toilet. So, anyways, if we do not periodically clean out the septic tank, we know that they will build up and our toxic waste will accumulate, and if we don't deal with it, it will blow. Here's a bummer part of that. When it does blow, and I'm talking about the stuff that's in us, it doesn't just affect us, it affects the people around us. It affects the people we love, it affects the people who aren't even involved, because we didn't want to deal with it. One of the most destructive things that took place in my life when Hannah's accident happened, when she drowned, was I swore I would never tell anyone the rest of my life. This is something I will take to the grave. And except for the grace of God working in my life, I came to a place where I finally felt free enough to share that. And yet I began a lifetime habit right then of hiding things in my life. Didn't matter what it was. I began a habit of hiding stuff. And it wreaked havoc on my own life. Families hurt together. If there's one person in the family that hurts, the whole family hurts. You can watch it when a mom or dad isn't doing good. You can see what happens to the kids. Or when one of the kids is hurting. Or even when someone who's outside the immediate family is hurting. The whole family hurts. They hurt together. It affects the whole family. A side note here, because David talked about this. He talked about it in verses 12 through 14. The church is a family. And we hurt together too. And when things aren't right, we hurt together. And when things are good, we rejoice together. The church is a family. Here's something a family does. A family sticks together because we're a family. Psalms 55:19, David says something that boggles my mind. He says, God, who is enthroned forever, will hear them and afflict them. Men who never change their ways and have no fear of God. Now, here's why that proclamation is so weird. That is not the typical response to someone who hurts you. Here, let me explain. Here's what David said. He said, God can handle my betrayer. And so, God, I surrender them to you. That's huge. Let me give you a couple things that this means, dealing with this stuff in us. It means releasing those who hurt us to God instead of judging them ourselves. If you have ever been hurt, I think it's fitting to remind you that God is a God of justice, and He can deal with those who hurt you far better than you can. The Bible instructs us not to judge others, not because they won't be judged, but because God, the righteous judge, will judge them, and He can do a much better job than you or I can. My sister, through our entire life, has never once given me a look of disapproval. She's never once turned her eyes or given me that look like she just doesn't love me or she resents me for what I said. She's never done that. And I can't tell you how thankful I am, because I honestly don't know if I could have made it if she would have. I don't know if I could have. I also need to remind you that if someone is harming you, you got to do something about that. You got to get help. Passivity in the face of evil is not a Jesus-like virtue. You got to do something about that. Here's the other thing it means. It means disinfecting the wound means acknowledging the hurt instead of burying it. And Paul wrote this in Romans 12:20. He said, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And here's what he is saying. And I love the part where he says, do not be overcome by evil. Here's what he's saying. Don't let evil gain more ground in your life than it already has. Don't let evil win. Don't let evil get the final blow, but overcome it. Deal with it. How do you do that? You acknowledge the hurt. You don't bury it. And so I don't know what you need to do to release your assailant. Maybe you need to write a letter to your ex, or you need to write a letter to the spouse of your ex, or maybe you need to talk to your kids, or maybe you need to talk to your parents or a coworker. I don't know. But that you make a move towards them, to serve them, to forgive them, to surrender, whatever that means. Now, this is so true. This is easier said than done for anyone who's been hurt. And I can't tell you what it's going to do for them, but I can tell you what it's going to do for you. It's going to be huge. Growing up, we used to babysit my sister all the time. It was what we did. We didn't mind doing it. We'd always pull our weight. And when I was alone with Hannah, anytime, I'd always say, Hannah, forgive me. Hannah, forgive me. Hannah, I am so sorry. If I could take it back, I would. If I could change it, if I could go back in time, I would. I am so sorry. And I would tell her this all the time. And it was hard because she could never say anything back. And then I remember in middle school, I was saying this to her one day, Hannah, I am so sorry. And she put her hand out and she just put it on my cheek. And she just smiled at me. It was huge. It changed my life. I'll never forget that moment. Here's the third thing. There is a desire to extend compassion to other people who are wounded. In his book, The Wounded Healer, Henry Nouwen writes, "Who can save a child from a burning house without taking the risk of being hurt by the flames? Who can listen to a story of loneliness and despair without taking a risk of experiencing similar pains in his own heart and even losing his precious peace of mind? In short, who can take away suffering without entering it? The great illusion of leadership is to think that a man can be led out of the desert by someone who has never been there." And the writer of Hebrews wrote this in Hebrews 5:2, and he's comparing you and I to priests. That you and I are priests to all those who are around us. He is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray, since he himself is subject to weakness. When you and I know what it's like to hurt, and we've found God to be greater than, there's a move and a switch that takes place in our life where we begin to go, I want to help other people who know this hurt. I want to reach out to them. And thank God Jesus knows our pain. Something that people have been hurt feel is that their hurt is greater than Jesus' sacrifice. And I got to remind myself, is Jesus shocked by your and I's hurt? Is he taken back by it? Would he have gone through all he went through if it was going to be inadequate to help you and I? No. He would not have suffered what he suffered if it was going to be inadequate. The cross is adequate. The thing that gives credibility to help those who are broken is our own brokenness. I have a hard time following people that don't have a limp because I don't know if I can relate to them. And so I love it when I see that someone else has a limp because I go, I can hang with you. I can follow you because you know what it's like to hurt. That's why Psalms 55 is so powerful, because it's written by a man who lived hurt, not by some scholar talking theoretically about how to deal with hurt. It's written by someone who knew what hurt was. In the mind of God, our hurt always has two people in mind, us and someone else. And one of the great lies we tell ourselves is that we're alone in our hurt. And yet God is saying, hey, open your eyes. There's a whole world of hurting people all around you. And I don't want to help just you, but I want to help them. And so maybe you've struggled with the hurt of infertility, or you know the wound of divorce, or maybe you were abused as a child. You were the child of an alcoholic. I don't know. But those are areas and arenas in your life where God is going to, should you look for it, give you the potential to reach out to people in those areas. That you could offer the grace of God to other people. It's one of the dynamics that I love about Celebrate Recovery, a ministry here at the church. It's a ministry led by wounded people. It's one of the things that I appreciate about our teaching pastors. They all have had big hurt. It's one of the things I love.